By the end of the 10th century, Viking raids were almost in decline in England. After expelling the Viking monarchs from York, the Kingdom of England lived in a period of relative peace. Edgar I, the Pacific, culminated the English hegemony. The neighboring kingdoms of the islands recognized their superiority, and the Vikings barely carried out any coastal raids. The defensive strategy based on the Burrs kept any kind of Norse invasion at bay, but 30 years after the fall of the so-called Danelaw, the Vikings returned to England with a formidable fleet of 94 ships. In command was the Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard and Olaf Tryggvason, son of a Norwegian king. Although the Vikings tended to avoid direct confrontations, this expedition led to a battle that would mark the second wave of the Viking invasions, Maldon. Throughout this video, we will briefly review the historical context that led to this confrontation, as well as its most relevant aspects. First, it should be noted that the main primary source for its study is a poem called the Battle of Maldon, which dates from the 11th century. There are also other contemporary historical works that attest to the confrontation and part of the story described in the poem. At the time, Denmark was undergoing a process of change. Christianization and the consolidation of monarchical power were among the main features of the legacy of Harald Bluetooth, father of Sweyn and his predecessor on the throne. Thanks to archaeology, we know the fortresses of Trelleborg that were considered as a symbol of royal power. Their purpose was diverse, as they provided a strong point to defend the territory, as well as a location to concentrate and train troops. Although we do not know to what extent he relied on these fortifications, we do know that Sweyn mobilized an army with more prepared troops among his ranks. In any case, we do know that Sweyn Forkbeard was briefly dethroned from the Danish throne by the Swedish king Eric the Victorious. This forced Sweyn to seek his life outside Scandinavia with his army, finding a potential ally in his exile, Olaf Tryggvason. Apparently, Olaf heard rumors of a great booty captured in Wales and Cornwall, so this could have motivated both Sweyn and Sweyn leaders to cooperate in an assault on the English coasts. The objective of the Viking fleet was to attack the eastern coast of Anglia, being Essex the main point of interest. There was one of the most important mints of the Kingdom of England, which was under the dominions of one of the most important ealdormen, Byrhtnoth. At that time, the English kings partially delegated their power to the ealdormen, as they acted as representatives of their royal power in different parts of the kingdom. Byrhtnoth was one of the most prominent and powerful of the time. Thus, the Viking fleet reached the English coast in August 991, forcibly landing on the island of Norhee in the estuary of the Blackwater River. The poor navigational conditions prevented Olaf's fleet from entering Essex, but gave them natural protection to establish a base camp. One of the great advantages of the Vikings was their skill with ships. The mobility of their ships allowed them to easily flee from unfavorable combat and to strike a blow at different locations with alacrity. In the best of cases, by simply waiting for high tide, they could re-embark without sacrificing troops to cover the retreat. This modus operandi was especially practical for them to disconcert the enemy and quickly resupply at the expense of the enemy's supplies. Thus, while the bulk of the troops of Olaf and Sweyn, although the presence of the latter is in doubt, remained on the island, other small groups were engaged in looting other locations such as Ipswich. In this way, the Vikings intended to exert pressure in the negotiation of a payment at the same time that they gathered resources to prolong the campaign. In this case, the negotiation of the tribute failed, and the confrontation became inevitable. Byrhtnoth mobilized his personal guard and his fyrd, a levy composed of free men trained for war who were called upon to defend the territory. Taking advantage of the terrain conditions, the Anglo-Saxons deployed in such a way as to block the tidal isthmus and prevent the Vikings from advancing. This strategic advantageous position alleviated the numerical difference which, a priori, was unfavorable to the defenders. But Byrhtnoth, overconfident in his possibilities and underestimating his enemy, allowed the Vikings to cross the isthmus. The Viking army in front of him were not inexperienced and untrained pirates. At least an important part of the Norse warriors were trained by Sweyn in Denmark or participated in some military campaign in Kievan Rus with Olaf. The Anglo-Saxons set out to launch projectiles against the Norsemen, who held up well with their shield wall, after which he ordered a melee assault. Again, Olaf's shield wall withstood the onslaught and launched a counterattack against Byrhtnoth, causing the death of the ealdorman. Panic soon spread through the Anglo-Saxon ranks, causing the bulk of the host to flee, except for the personal guard. This victory of the Vikings at Maldon on August 11, 991, marked a turning point. While it's true that Olaf's army did not dare to sack Essex, Ethelred the Unready, King of England, was forced to pay a hefty tribute of 10,000 pounds of silver to make the Vikings leave England. This type of tax got its own name, Danegeld, or Danish tax, a type of tribute that would be very recurrent in this second wave of Viking invasions. Although it was not the first time the Anglo-Saxons paid a tribute to the Vikings to keep the peace, the Danegeld became a constant. The English monarchs, instead of confronting the Vikings directly, as had been their policy up to that time, opted to pay tribute directly or to hire other Viking leaders as mercenaries. The economic and political repercussions of the Danegeld and the raids led the Kingdom of England to devastation. 23 years after the Battle of Maldon, Denmark culminated this raiding process with the conquest of England. That's it for today, but don't worry, we're just getting started. Thanks for joining this historical ride, and get ready for more fun facts and stories in the next video. See you soon, time travelers.